Let me ask you something. You run a company, you have 3 senior people on your team, and one of them is secretly feeding your plans to a competitor. You cannot fire all 3. You cannot prove which one without tipping them off. You cannot use any kind of force or pressure. What do? Most people freeze here, because the obvious moves all backfire. Fire all 3 and you gut your own team. Accuse the wrong person and now you have made a real enemy out of an innocent one. Do nothing and the leaks keep coming. There is a 4th option. And it is so clean, so precise, and so psychologically sophisticated that real intelligence agencies have been using it for decades. MI5 calls it the barium meal test. Tom Clancy called it the Canary trap. And in Season 2 of Game of Thrones, a fictional dwarf in a medieval fantasy world executed it so perfectly that counterintelligence analysts have genuinely cited the scene in discussions about the technique. Today, we are going to break down exactly how Tyrion Lannister pulled it off, why each move worked, where this technique comes from in the real world, and what it tells us about how power actually operates. This is not a recap. This is a breakdown. To understand why the trap was necessary, you need to understand what Tyrion walked into. He arrives in King's Landing as the new hand of the king. His father Tywin sent him there not out of affection, but because somebody had to manage the disaster that Joffrey's reign was becoming. Tyrion is smart, experienced, and politically sharp, but he lands in a city that hates him, inside a court that is actively working against him, surrounded by his sister Cersei's network of informants. Here is the core problem. Every sensitive conversation Tyrion has inside the small council chamber leaks back to Cersei before the day is over. He cannot plan, he cannot maneuver, he cannot do his job. He is the hand of the king, and he cannot make a single move without his sister already knowing about it and preparing a counter. He has 3 main suspects. Grand Maester Pycelle, who has served the crown for decades and is deeply tied to Lannister power. Lord Varys, the Master of Whispers, whose entire value is built on knowing everything about everyone. And Petyr Baelish, known as Littlefinger, the Master of Coin, who has been playing every side for personal gain since before anyone was paying attention. Any one of them could be the leak, maybe more than one. Tyrion cannot confront them directly. These are not men who crack under pressure. Pycelle has survived multiple regime changes. Varys has outlived kings. Littlefinger has turned betrayal into a business model. And if Tyrion accuses the wrong man, he burns a potentially useful relationship for nothing. So he builds the trap. Before we get into how Tyrion does it, let me explain the technique itself because it is genuinely fascinating. The term Canary trap was coined by novelist Tom Clancy in his 1987 book Patriot Games. But the technique itself is much older. In British intelligence circles, it has been called the barium meal test for decades, named after a medical procedure where a patient swallows a barium compound so doctors can trace where it goes inside the body. Same logic, you feed different versions of information to different suspects. Wherever it ends up tells you exactly who carried it there. The key principle is this: you do not need to catch someone in the act, you just need the information itself to become the fingerprint. Now here is what makes it hard to execute well. The trap only works if each version of the lie is believable to the specific person receiving it. A generic lie that does not fit the person's worldview will get dismissed or questioned rather than repeated. You need each suspect to receive a version of the story that feels real and valuable enough to pass on. That is where most people fail when they try this. They focus on the mechanics and forget the psychology. Tyrion does not forget the psychology. That is what makes his version of this so impressive. Tyrion's first meeting is with Grand Maester Pycelle. Watch how he enters this room. He does not walk in projecting authority. He immediately makes the interaction personal and low stakes, complaining about his own physical discomfort. He lets Pycelle play the role of the wise helper, the experienced elder advising the struggling young lord. Pycelle loves this role. It makes him feel essential and respected. Tyrion then stacks the flattery deliberately. He tells Pycelle he trusts him. He asks for loyalty explicitly and out loud. Why? Because when you make someone verbally confirm their loyalty before you share a secret, you raise the psychological cost of betraying that secret. You are not just getting information anymore. You are breaking a spoken promise. Most people do not think of themselves as the kind of person who does that, so they justify it. They tell themselves they are not really betraying the trust, they are doing the right thing by informing someone who needs to know. That justification is the crack Tyrion is aiming at. The lie he feeds Pycelle is about a marriage alliance with House Martell of Dorne. Why Dorne specifically? Because it is the most threatening choice from Cersei's perspective. The Martells have an old grudge against the Lannisters. Sending Cersei's daughter Pycelle to live among people who despise her family as a political bargaining chip is exactly the kind of move Cersei would want to stop immediately. Tyrion also picks this lie because it is the kind of conservative, traditional diplomatic move that Pycelle's mind is built to process and believe. Pycelle thinks in terms of established houses and historical alliances. He is not a creative thinker. A boring, sensible plan is more convincing to a boring, sensible man. And then Tyrion ends with the trigger phrase, "The queen must not know." That phrase is not a caution. It is an invitation. Pycelle's entire function in that court is telling Cersei things she is not supposed to know. Tyrion is practically pointing at the door and saying, "Go ahead." He is telling Pycelle exactly what to do with this information while pretending to say the opposite. The second meeting is with Varys, and Tyrion adjusts everything. Varys is not flattered by compliments. He sees through social performance because social performance is his entire field. He is amused by it, not moved by it. So when Tyrion opens with the same trigger line, "The queen must not know," Varys does not lean in with eagerness. He leans back with appreciation. He says he loves conversations that begin that way. He is already treating this like a game. So Tyrion gives him a different kind of lie. He tells Varys that the plan involves marrying Pycelle to Theon Greyjoy, the ward of the Starks, who at this point is actively riding with Robb Stark's army. This is a much more radical idea. It is the kind of lateral, unexpected move that would appeal to a mind like Varys, who thinks in terms of unconventional leverage. The logic Tyrion provides is realpolitik. Theon's father hates the Starks, so turn Theon against them from within. Get the Greyjoy ships in the process. Varys pushes back with logic as Tyrion expected. He points out the obvious problem with this plan, and Tyrion counters with a strategic answer that sounds genuinely thought out. But here is the interesting outcome. Varys does not run to Cersei. When the trap springs, Cersei confronts Tyrion about Dorne, not Theon Greyjoy, which means Varys held the information. He passed the test. Whether he kept it because he was loyal or because he wanted to see how the situation developed before using the information is a separate question. But he did not leak it. That tells Tyrion something useful about Varys as an operator. The third meeting is with Littlefinger, and this one is the most psychologically precise of the three. Littlefinger has no patience for preamble. He gets to the point fast. So Tyrion does not warm him up the way he warmed up Pycelle. He just goes directly to the lie. He tells Littlefinger that the plan is to marry Pycelle to Robin Arryn of the Vale. Why the Vale? Because Littlefinger has a deep, almost obsessive personal connection to that region. He grew up there as a ward of House Tully. Lysa Arryn, who now controls the Vale, is someone he has manipulated and maintained influence over for years. The Vale is his playground. His network is there. If a royal marriage is arranged in the Vale, Littlefinger is the obvious broker, which means power and leverage flows through him. Tyrion is not just telling Littlefinger a lie, he is offering Littlefinger a role. And Littlefinger, being Littlefinger, immediately asks what is in it for him. He is not interested in loyalty or realm security. He is interested in transaction. Tyrion delivers the prize, Harrenhal, the largest castle in Westeros, and with it the title of Lord of the Riverlands. Littlefinger plays the negotiating game, pretending to be cautious about Harrenhal being cursed. Tyrion calls the bluff and sweetens the deal further, and Littlefinger takes it. But here is what is interesting about Littlefinger in this trap. He does not leak this particular secret to Cersei either, and the reason is built directly into the lie. If he tells Cersei about the Vale plan, the deal falls through. He loses Harrenhal. His self-interest locks the secret in. He passes the test not because he is loyal, but because betrayal would cost him too much. That is a different kind of reliability. Less noble, but equally predictable. Cersei confronts Tyrion. She is furious. She says she will not allow Pycelle to be shipped off to Dorne the way she herself was shipped off to Robert Baratheon. She mentions Dorne. That is all Tyrion needed. One word, one specific detail from one specific version of three different lies. The Canary sang, and it was Pycelle's Canary. The elegance here is that Cersei does not realize she has identified her own informant by confronting Tyrion. She thinks she is winning the argument. She is actually providing the evidence. And notice what Tyrion does with this. He does not show triumph. He does not wave the information around. He pivots immediately to a different moral argument, defending the marriage arrangement on the grounds that it is safer for Pycelle to be away from King's Landing during a war. He wins the intelligence battle and the rhetorical battle in the same breath, without revealing that he just collected exactly what he needed. This is not just clever fiction. The barium meal test, as real intelligence agencies call it, has a documented history going back decades. MI5 used versions of it during the Cold War when hunting for moles and double agents. There are documented cases involving suspected Soviet assets inside British intelligence where fabricated operational details were fed to individuals and monitored for Soviet reaction. One of the most well-known real-world applications came during World War II. British intelligence ran Operation Mincemeat in 1943, planting fake documents on a corpse washed ashore in Spain, suggesting the Allied invasion target was Greece rather than Sicily. The Germans repositioned forces based on the false information. The actual Allied landing in Sicily succeeded with reduced resistance. That is, the Canary trap used a strategic deception rather than internal leak detection, but the underlying mechanic is the same. Unique information, planted intentionally, monitored for reaction. More recently, Elon Musk used a version of this technique in 2008 when Tesla had a leak problem. An employee was passing confidential information to a news outlet. Musk sent what looked like identical emails to all relevant employees, but each email was actually coded differently using single versus double spaces between sentences. The spacing pattern formed a unique binary signature per recipient. When the leaked email appeared in press coverage, the spacing pattern identified exactly which copy had been shared. There is a reason Musk's version partially failed, by the way. The company's general counsel accidentally forwarded his own version to everyone, which collapsed the uniqueness of the signatures. The technique requires that each version remains isolated to its intended recipient. If a version gets circulated internally before it can leak externally, the fingerprint gets contaminated. Tyrion understood this implicitly. He conducts each meeting privately and separately. He makes sure the information does not circulate before it reaches its intended audience. Tyrion now has to manage 3 different people who all received different versions of a lie and whose relationships with him are now in 3 different states. With Pycelle, the response is clean. Pycelle is confirmed as Cersei's informant. He gets removed from the small council and thrown in a cell. His social status, his dignity, the beard that represented his elder statesman identity, all of it gets stripped away. The message is clear. Institutional position does not protect you from targeted intelligence. Being Grand Maester for 30 years means nothing when you have been caught. With Varys, the outcome is different. Varys held the information. He passed. So when Tyrion encounters him afterward, the dynamic shifts. They have a real conversation. Varys challenges Tyrion with his famous riddle about where power truly resides. This is no longer interrogation. It is the beginning of a genuine working relationship between 2 intelligent operators who have decided they respect each other. With Littlefinger, the situation is more delicate. Littlefinger was not caught leaking anything, but he is not happy about being used as a test subject. He is insulted, and an insulted Littlefinger is a dangerous Littlefinger. Tyrion recognizes this immediately because making enemies out of people you were not even targeting is a wasteful outcome. So he pivots. He offers Littlefinger a real mission with a real reward to replace the fake one. He keeps the merchant in line by keeping his account open. 3 different people, 3 different post-trap outcomes, 3 different management strategies. That is sophisticated. Here is what this scene is actually about, underneath all the medieval politics and fictional marriages. Every person in that story has a price. Pycelle's price is feeling respected and close to power. Varys' price is intellectual engagement. Littlefinger's price is material advancement. Tyrion does not force any of them to do anything. He does not threat. He does not coerce. He builds a tailored reality for each person that feels true because it aligns perfectly with what each person already wants to believe. That is what makes the Canary trap so powerful. The lie works not because it is clever, but because it is personalized. A generic deception gets questioned. A deception that speaks directly to your desires and your worldview, that feels like exactly the kind of information you would want to receive, that is almost impossible to be skeptical about. The real world has been using this for decades, from World War II to Cold War counterintelligence to corporate leak detection. Dartmouth researchers recently built an AI system called WeForge that automates Canary trap document generation, creating uniquely watermarked versions of sensitive files at scale. The Canary trap is not going away. It is getting more sophisticated. Tyrion proved that the most dangerous weapon in any political environment is not military force. It is knowing something your opponent does not know you know, and he proved it in a single afternoon using 3 conversations and a fictional wedding. That is the game within the game, and most people never even see it being played.